We are told, from the moment we can understand words, that we are free. It is the cornerstone of our identity, the battle cry of our politics, the very fuel of our economies. We define our lives by it. The freedom to choose, to speak, to be who we want to be. But if this is freedom, why does it so often feel like a trap? Why does the weight of infinite choice so often paralyze us? Why does the pursuit of our own desires so often lead to exhaustion, isolation, and a quiet desperation? What if we have profoundly misunderstood the assignment? What if everything we've been taught about freedom, as a political right, a consumer privilege, an exercise of personal will, is, at best, a partial truth, and at worst, a magnificent delusion? This is a journey into the heart of that delusion. We will venture beyond the slogans and the surface-level debates. We will dismantle freedom layer by layer through the political philosophies that shaped our societies, the neuroscience that shapes our choices, and the radical, uncomfortable psychology that suggests the very one seeking freedom is the source of their own imprisonment. Buckle up. We are about to discover that true freedom doesn't look like a choice. It looks like a surrender. Part 2. The political mirage of shields, cages, and the theater of liberty. Our modern love affair with freedom was consummated in the 18th century, in the intellectual furnace of the European Enlightenment. This was the European spark that promised to light the world. Thinkers like John Locke didn't just talk about freedom. They weaponized it against the divine right of kings. Locke's central idea was revolutionary. Political power requires consent. You are born, he argued, free, equal, and independent. Your body is your first piece of property, and from that self-ownership flows the right to the fruits of your labor. Freedom, for Locke, was a circle drawn around what you own. The law's purpose was to be a shield, protecting that circle. This was the philosophical wrecking ball that would help build modern democracy. But here lies the first fatal contradiction, the scar on the face of liberty. Locke's circle was drawn with a narrow compass. It explicitly excluded those without property, the landless poor. Its logic was twisted to justify the enslavement of Africans, who were categorized as property themselves. And it largely ignored women, who were seen as property adjacent. From the very start, the grand narrative of universal freedom contained a hierarchy. For some, the law was a shield. For others, it was the very bars of a cage. Then came Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who peered behind the curtain of this new social order and delivered one of the most devastating lines in philosophy. Man is born free, and everywhere he is in chains. Rousseau wasn't just talking about literal shackles. He pointed to the invisible chains of custom, tradition, social expectation, and envy that bind us the moment we enter society. We are born free in potential, he argued, but are immediately sculpted, distorted by the world around us. Our natural empathy is crushed under the wheel of amour propre, a toxic self-love built on comparing ourselves to others. To manage these competing, corrupted selves, Rousseau proposed the general will, the collective interest of the citizen body. But who defines that will? The potential for a new tyranny, a tyranny of the majority or of those who claim to speak for it, was born right there alongside the dream of pure democracy. This is where Baron de Montesquieu offered the technical manual. Trust no one with unlimited power, he warned. Everyone, he said, is apt to abuse it until they hit a limit. His solution was the elegant, mechanical idea of the separation of powers, executive, legislative, judicial, each acting as a check on the others. This is the brilliant skeleton of constitutions like America's. It's a system designed for fallen angels, not saints. But what happens when the checks and balances fail? The sources present a chilling diagnosis. In our modern era, the factions don't collide, they collude. When corporate lobbyists draft legislation, when media empires merge with political interests, when the flow of capital becomes synonymous with the flow of speech itself. The separation of powers becomes political theater. We are left with the spectacle of choice, while the machinery of power hums along undisturbed. We have been sold a poisoned catechism, the equation of capitalism with freedom. This is a category error. Capitalism is an immensely powerful economic operating system, a strategy for resource allocation and innovation. It is not a theory of human liberty or a substitute for ethics. When we conflate the two, we make a fatal mistake. We begin to believe that a free market inevitably creates a free people, and that any regulation of the market is an assault on liberty itself. We are trained, as the sources note, to mistake checks on exploitation for assaults on liberty. We worship the tool and forget the purpose. The result? A society where freedom is increasingly measured in purchasing power, where liberty becomes a commodity, and where the long chains of economic necessity feel just as binding as the short chains of political tyranny. The political cage, we start to see, isn't made just of bad laws. It's made of invisible assumptions, of conflated ideas, and of a freedom so narrow it becomes its own prison. But even if we could redesign the perfect polity, a cage of a different order awaits us, one not made of laws or economies, but of flesh, blood, and electricity. The biological prison. Part 3. The biological prison, the captain and the ship. Let's assume for a moment that we achieve the perfect society, a utopia of absolute political and economic liberty. You are, in the eyes of the law, utterly free. And yet, you wake up to a different master, a throbbing headache, a knot of anxiety in your stomach, a craving for coffee, for sugar, for a screen. This is the second, more intimate cage, the body. We rarely think of our own biology as a prison. We identify with it. I am my body. But the relationship is more akin to a captain and a ship. A ship with its own stubborn rules, decaying materials, and a mysterious engine room the captain can barely comprehend. The sources call this a ball and chain. We are, they note, captives to fragile mechanisms that will inevitably fail. Your heart will beat roughly 2.5 billion times and then stop. You did not choose its rhythm. Consider your daily routine. You are told when to eat by pangs of hunger, when to sleep by a tidal wave of melatonin, when to seek warmth, when to flee pain. As the sources starkly put it, this is the schedule of a prisoner, not a free man. Yes, the mind can, with heroic effort, override these urges for a time. The hunger striker, the sleep-deprived artist. But this is a temporary mutiny. Eventually, the body reasserts its fundamental authority. The conspiracy between mind and body always wins. But the prison is not just the body's demands. It's the very lens through which we perceive reality. Our senses are not windows to the world. They are biological editors. We see a thin slice of the electromagnetic spectrum. We hear a narrow band of vibrations. Our brain is not a passive receiver. It's a prediction machine, constructing a coherent story from limited, noisy data. The sources offer a powerful metaphor. If an artist is told they are free to create anything, but are given only an etch-a-sketch, are they truly free? Our consciousness, our glorious eye, may simply be the user interface for this vastly complex, predetermined biological machinery. The hardware, our senses, our brain structure, and the software, our instincts, our hormonal drives, create the boundaries of our possible experience. You cannot will yourself to see a new color. You cannot choose to find rot delicious. The menu of your reality has already been written by millions of years of evolution. This brings us to the heart of the scientific and philosophical challenge. To freedom, determinism, Picture the universe as a vast, seamless river of cause and effect. Every event is the inevitable result of prior events, stretching back to the beginning of time. The motion of planets, the fall of an apple, the chemical reaction in a neuron, all are subject to the unbreakable laws of physics. Now, place yourself in this river. You are a physical being. Your brain, where choices are forged, is a physical organ. Therefore, your thoughts, your desires, your very will must also be part of this causal chain. The choice you believe you are making right now, to keep watching this video, to get a glass of water, is, in this view, the predetermined outcome of your genetics, your upbringing, your current brain state, and the cosmic history that led to this moment. The traditional notion of libertarian free will, the idea that your will is an uncaused cause, a ghost in the machine that can intervene in the physical chain, becomes untenable without appealing to the supernatural. As philosopher Sam Harris and others have argued, if your choice truly pops into existence from nothing, with no prior cause, that isn't freedom, that's randomness. It's insanity. You are not the author of that thought. It is merely a psychic hiccup. So, are we just puppets of physics? Sleepwalkers deluded into believing we are awake? Part 4. The compatibilist gambit walker versus sleeper. This bleak prospect has led many thinkers to a compromise position. Compatibilism. Compatibilists agree with determinists that the universe is causal and our brains are physical. But they argue, we've defined freedom incorrectly all along. True freedom, they say, is not about being uncaused. It's about the source of the causation. Consider our two climbers, Walker and Sleeper. Both end up on the mountain summit. Sleeper was taken there against his will, an external force overriding any desire of his own. Walker, however, desired to be there. Every grueling step was caused by his internal wants, his values, his will, even if that will itself was shaped by his past. The compatibilist argues, Walker is free, Sleeper is not. Freedom is when your actions align with your internal psychological state, when you are not coerced by external forces like a gun to your head or a kidnapper's sled. It is self-determination rather than external determination. This is a pragmatic, psychological definition of freedom. It's what we mean in everyday life when we say we made a free choice. It preserves moral responsibility. Walker can be praised for his effort. A criminal who acted on his own vicious desires can be blamed. But the sources hint at a deeper, unresolved unease. Even this freedom is a relative state. As they suggest, perhaps we should stop asking the binary question, are we free? And instead ask, how free are we right now in this specific situation? A choice made under threat is less free than one made after calm reflection. A decision driven by a hidden addiction is less free than one driven by conscious values. A mind clouded by propaganda is less free than one with access to truth. Freedom, in this light, becomes a matter of degrees, a spectrum of autonomy within the giant, humming engine of cause and effect. But for some, this is still not enough. It feels like being told you are free to rearrange the furniture in your cell. The cell itself, the biological, deterministic universe, remains. And there is a more profound cell yet to examine. The cell not of the body or of physics, but of the self. The cell where the jailer and the prisoner are the same entity. This is where we turn to the radical insights of Jiddu Krishnamurti. We've examined the political cage and the biological one. But what if the very entity seeking to be free, the I, the thinker, the chooser, is itself the ultimate confinement? Part 5. Krishnamurti and the psychological cage. The jailer is the prisoner. We arrive now at the most subtle and radical layer of the inquiry. Beyond the laws of man and the laws of physics lies the law of the psyche. Here, The philosopher and spiritual teacher Jiddu Krishnamurti offers not a theory to adopt, but a mirror to hold up to our own minds. His central, shocking proposition is this: the primary obstacle to freedom is the very entity that seeks it. The thinker is the thought. The jailer is the prisoner. We believe the self, this collection of memories, opinions, desires, and fears that we call me, is the agent of our liberation. Krishnamurti suggests it is the core of our bondage. On-screen text: the prison of knowledge. We are raised to believe knowledge is freedom, but Krishnamurti makes a crucial distinction. Knowledge, in his sense, is the dead weight of the past, the accumulated memory of experience, of what we've been told, of our hurts and our pleasures. It is the software running in the background. When we face any new challenge, a relationship conflict, a fear, a creative block, we don't meet it freshly. We meet it through the filter of this knowledge. We compare it to past events. We judge it based on old conclusions. As Krishnamurti said, the moment you say "I know," you have stopped learning. A mind burdened by "I know" is never free. It is always translating the living present into the stale terminology of the past. This is why ideologies and beliefs are, for him, not bridges, but walls. We cling to a religious belief, a political identity, a national flag, not because it is fundamentally true, but because it gives the anxious self a sense of security, a location, a definition. I am a Christian. I am a liberal. I am an entrepreneur. Each label is a fortification, and as the sources note, this is a process of isolation. It divides us from others who hold different labels, and more insidiously, it divides us from the direct, unmediated experience of life. So, what is the alternative? Krishnamurti's call is for freedom from the known. This is not amnesia. It is the ability to observe the present moment, the anger as it arises, the fear as it tightens your chest, the beauty of a tree, without immediately naming it, analyzing it, or trying to change it according to past patterns. Imagine someone insults you. The immediate, conditioned reaction is anger, hurt, a cascade of memories. He always does this. I am disrespected. This is the mechanical, prison-like response of the recorded self. To be free is to see the insult, to feel the physiological reaction, but to observe the entire sequence, the words, the rising emotion, the storytelling mind, as one would watch a storm cloud pass in the sky, without identifying with it, without becoming the storm. In that space of pure observation, a non-mechanical response becomes possible. Perhaps silence, perhaps a question, perhaps nothing at all. That is freedom in action. Part 6. The paradox of effort, the Chinese finger trap of the mind. This leads to the most profound paradox in the search for freedom, one the sources underscore relentlessly. The desire to be free is the final chain. The self, feeling its own confinement, launches a project. I must become free. It seeks methods, disciplines, gurus, philosophies. It tries to will itself into freedom. It practices meditation to become peaceful. It studies to become wise. It renounces greed to become virtuous. But look at the structure. I, the self, will use effort to transform myself into a better, freer state. Krishnamurti calls this self-centered activity. All effort to become something is a reinforcement of the central actor, the me who wants a result. It is the psychological equivalent of the Chinese finger trap. The harder you pull, the tighter the bondage. The mind cannot use its own mechanisms to dismantle itself. This is the fallacy of psychological time. We say, I am greedy now, but tomorrow I will practice non-greed and become free. This tomorrow is an illusion, a postponement managed by the self. It keeps the self in business. Krishnamurti's challenge is terrifying. Transformation is not a gradual process. It must happen now, in the immediate present, or it is just another modification of the past, another costume for the same prisoner. True freedom is not an achievement. It is a cessation. It is what remains when the effortful, becoming, comparing, judging activity of the self stops. The sources point to this state as creative emptiness. It is not nihilistic or barren. It is a mind that is silent, not because it has been suppressed by discipline, but because it has fully understood its own noisy, repetitive nature and therefore come to an end. In this silence, there is no observer separate from the observed. There is only perception, only what is. And it is only in this space that what Krishnamurti calls love can exist. Not love as emotion, memory, or attachment. Those are possessions of the self. But love as a state of being, total, unconditional attention. Where the self is, with its demands and insecurities, love is not. Where the self is absent, love is the natural relationship between all things. Part 7. Relationship, the mirror, and the mirage. We cannot conduct this inner investigation in a vacuum. As Krishnamurti constantly emphasized, life is relationship. Relationship is not just with people, but with ideas, with nature, with our own thoughts. It is the living mirror in which the structure of the self is most vividly and often painfully revealed. Our typical relationships, the sources suggest, are rarely free. They are transactions of the self. We use relationships for security, for gratification, for comfort, to escape our own loneliness. We say, "I love you," but often mean, "I need you." The moment the other person fails to provide what our self desires, admiration, support, a sense of completeness, conflict arises. Hurt, jealousy, and possessiveness are not signs of deep love. They are the violent protests of a threatened self. This kind of relationship is, as noted earlier, another process of isolation. Two fortresses negotiating a treaty, never truly meeting. But relationship can become the greatest teacher. In the friction with another, their different opinions, their unpredictable actions, their very otherness, we see our own conditioned reactions spring up instantly. Our defensiveness, our pride, our hidden demands. If we can observe these reactions in the moment, not to blame the other, but to understand the machinery of our own psyche, then relationship becomes a mirror wiped clean. To be free in relationship is to relate without the image. That is, to meet the other person now, not through the accumulated memory of who they were yesterday or who you need them to be tomorrow. It is vulnerability without an agenda. It is attention without demand. In that space, something beyond transaction can occur. Communion. This is the practical ground where freedom from the known is tested. And what is true between two people is true for humanity. The sources draw a direct line from the isolated self to the fractured world. Nationalism, racism, ideological warfare. These are just the isolated, fearful self, writ large. My country, my religion, my ideology become the new collective walls. To speak of national freedom in this context is often to speak of a larger, more dangerous isolation. True freedom, therefore, cannot be divisive. It must be inclusive of the whole. Part 8. The revolution that is not a revolution. Given all this, the call for change is undeniable. But it is not the change we are accustomed to. It is not the violent, future-oriented revolution of replacing one political system with another, one set of rulers with another. As the sources argue, that is mere rearranging the furniture in the burning house. If the individuals within the system are still driven by greed, fear, and the divisive consciousness of the self, the new system will inevitably corrupt into a new shape of the old tyranny. The required revolution is inward, immediate, and non-accumulative. It is not a movement from here to there. It is a breaking of the field of time itself, psychologically. This is the final, most subtle point. The search itself must end. As long as you are seeking freedom, enlightenment, peace, or God, you are affirming the existence of the seeker, the self, and its goal in time. You are perpetuating the very division that causes the pain. The sources are adamant. You cannot find freedom. You can only cease the activity that denies it. So what is to be done? Not a passive resignation, but an alert, passive awareness. This is the essence of the pathless path. 1. Observation. To watch the movements of your own mind, thought, emotion, memory, with choiceless awareness. Without condemning, this is bad. Without justifying, this is because of my childhood. Without trying to change it, just seeing the fact. 2. Seeing the self as fact. To see greed, fear, or anger not as abstract sins, but as actual present phenomena in your consciousness. To see the I that claims to own these traits as another set of phenomena. When you see the prison as the prison, fully without the desire to escape, a transformation occurs in that very perception. 3. The blaze of attention. As Krishnamurti said, to pay total attention is act. When you give your complete attention to your jealousy, with all its nuances and justifications, in that flame of attention, the jealousy burns itself away. It is not resisted. It is consumed by the energy of observation. In this, there is no method, no authority, no guru to follow. Following another is the surest way to remain a prisoner. The truth is a pathless land, and you must walk it alone, which means walking without the alone self. Conclusion: the river and the empty boat. So, what have we found? Freedom is not what you think. It is not the political right to vote, though vigilance over those rights is a sacred duty. Cultivating our garden. It is not the economic power to consume, though equity is necessary for a just society. It is not even the philosophical compatibilist's action according to internal desire, though that marks a degree of relative autonomy. True freedom is of another order entirely. It is psychological freedom, and it has a paradoxical signature. It is not control, but surrender, not to an external God, but to the truth of what is. It is not more knowledge, but freedom from the known. It is not the strengthening of the will, but the dissolving of the willful self. It is not found in time, but in the eternal present. It is not a possession, but a state of being, creative emptiness. In this emptiness, action happens, but it is not the isolated action of a fragment fighting the world. It is the appropriate, intelligent, compassionate response of the whole to the part. It is what Einstein, echoing this ancient wisdom, pointed to. Overcoming the optical delusion of consciousness, that we are separate from the rest of the universe. True religiosity, he said, is nourished by this feeling of cosmic connection. We began by asking who is the captain of the boat. We discovered the captain is a story told by the boat. The Enlightenment showed us the boat is built by history. Science showed us the river's currents are determined by physics. And the sages show us that the story of the separate captain is the source of all suffering. True freedom isn't steering the boat. It's the realization that you are the water. It is the river, aware of itself, flowing.